Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Friday 420. Joining us today from Bangkok, Thailand, is my guest, Damian Michalski, Chief Cultivation Officer and co-founder of Thai cannabis company Evergreen Medica. Damian specializes in helping commercial facilities grow medical-grade cannabis for export, creating the procedures and protocols to pass strict international standards for purity. On today's show, we're going to learn what Rubisco is, and we're going to talk about how cultivators can get the most out of their growing environment to improve quality and yield. So let's get started. Damian, welcome to the show today.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's jump right in. So you wrote something recently that I found really insightful. You were talking about how most growers monitor the temperature of their room, but most don't monitor, many don't monitor the temperature of their plants, in particular leaf temperature. And your conclusion was that leaf temperature can be more important to monitor than room temperature. And you mentioned a term that I had never heard of before, which was Rubisco. And so I'd like to start there. Can you tell us what Rubisco is and why it's a term cultivators should know?
Sure. Yeah. So, just to put it kind of in layman's terms, without getting into the nitty gritty science, Rubisco is essentially the enzyme that turns CO2 into biomass. It's directly responsible for the plant's photosynthesis. It's directly responsible for basically the entire plant and your yield.
You said
So,
it's an enzyme, you said?
it's an enzyme. It's an
Yeah.
enzyme that operates, and it just pretty much converts, CO2, everything into sugars and energy, and it's responsible for photosynthesis. So if if you're not monitoring the leaf surface temperature, Rubisco is very kind of slow and inefficient. So if it's not in the right temperature range in terms of leaf surface temperature, it will it won't function. So I used in the little post I made on LinkedIn an example with LEDs. So for the longest time, people were growing with HPS bulbs. HPS bulbs give off radiant heat, so it's always been said to keep your room temperature, between, I'm going to use Celsius here, 24 to 25 degrees. I think that's probably around 73, 75 Fahrenheit, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
That's kind of just been, and obviously for certain cultivars, you might go a little bit warmer, a little bit cooler, but that was kind of the range. And that was because those HPS bulbs were giving off radiant heat. So when you're around 24, 25 degrees, your leaf surface temperature would probably be closer to 26, 27 in that
Mm.
range,
Yeah.
which is, I would say it it is cultivar dependent, but on average, you'd see Rubisco functioning most optimally between 24 and 26, sometimes even 27 degrees Celsius,
Mm.
and that just worked great. So when LEDs came out, everybody switched to LEDs, and then their yields went down. The quality wasn't bad, but everyone was like, "Oh, I'm getting way better yields with HPS, and
Mm.
LEDs are just not there. They're just not there." Well, that wasn't necessarily the case. Yes, there were some, maybe issues with spectrum early on, but really the primary issue was that people were running LED rooms the same way they were running HPS rooms, which is, that same kind of cooler temperature, but not taking into account that LEDs don't give off radiant heat. Um, I'm sure if you've grown long enough, you've probably been burnt by an HPS bulb before at some point in your
Yeah.
life. It's not fun.
Yeah.
You can't really touch it or get too close to it. With LED, I can pretty much touch the bars, and it doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So
Well, the ballast is giving off heat, but
the ballast is giving off heat. Depends on your situation. I have my ballast outside the room to
yeah.
reduce the heat load, but
Yeah.
yes, but it's minimal in
Yeah.
comparison to what the bulb is putting off.
Right.
So if you're not getting that temperature, Rubisco is operating too cold. So as
Mm.
an example, if in an LED room, if you're running the room 24, 25 degrees Celsius or in that 70, 75 Fahrenheit range, your leaf surface temperature is usually about 3 degrees less Celsius. So you're
Mm.
going to be around 21 to 22, and that's when you're just going to see your plants just decline in terms of their speed of growth, and that's where your yield goes down tremendously. I've seen this across, probably hundreds of facilities that I've gone to, where I go into a room and I'm like, it's too cold in here,
Yeah.
and they're just running it the way they've always been taught, And when I ask what's the leaf surface temperature, very rarely are they even measuring that. They're just measuring room. The room really doesn't matter. The room is the room. It's what the plants are feeling, because the uh, plant response is from their leaf surface temperature, and that's affected by the equipment. So this is a huge game changer. If you are running LEDs and you're running those cooler temperatures to start, I if you ramp up that temperature. So let's say I run my LED room closer to 28, 29 degrees to start, and that gets my Rubisco to, or leaf surface temperature to about 26, which is where I'm trying to hold it. And it's just I've seen yields increase 40%, if not more. Um,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden people go, oh, LEDs are great, and they are great because you do save on cooling and other aspects. Now, mind you, there is that fine balance that you have to find. You don't want to run your rooms that hot until end of harvest, because that's you're not going to preserve your cannabinoids, you're not going to preserve your terpenes. So you kind of want to, depending on the cultivar and how you finish, you want to run that Rubisco till you're happy with the bud structure. You're kind of you're not going to determine your yield in the last 2 weeks. That work should already be done before that. So when you're not going to sacrifice yield, that's when you want to start dropping those temperatures down to start focusing on preserving the chemistry of the plant. Because I've seen people grow with just keeping Rubisco at 26, and they ran the room hot the entire time, and they got great yield, but then they sacrificed completely on the other end of quality. So it's finding
Yep.
that fine balance.
So that's kind of part of the crop steering, making it seem like summer, like they're moving into the end of the season, so they flower.
Absolutely.
Um,
One thing I will point out is
yep.
it's not Rubisco on its own. It's not just leaf surface temperature. So everything plays a role. Like leaf surface temperature, I'd say is the biggest impact on Rubisco. But CO2 concentration is really important. PPFD is really important. Irrigation, nitrogen availability, all of those things kind of work together uh, to get your final product. But for example, CO2. If you're just pumping CO2, lights come on and you're just pumping CO2 blindly, it's not really doing anything. The plants can only absorb CO2 when the stomata's open.
Hmm.
And if you ever get an opportunity, it's really cool. If you take a leaf first thing in the morning when lights turn on and you put it on under a microscope, you'll actually see the stomatas like they're quite closed, and it
Yep.
takes about 45 minutes to an hour before they fully open. And so if you take that from the same plant, another leaf, 45 minutes to an hour later, you'll see a noticeable difference of the stomata's opening. So we like to delay and ramp up the CO2 slowly as the plants are waking up. I like to often kind of liken plants to humans in a way. When your alarm goes off or the lights go on, you're not just getting pumped full of oxygen and food immediately, right? You kind of want to wake up slowly, maybe go
Right.
for a walk or do something. So that's kind of what we're doing with the plants. We want to be gentle. It kind of mimics the outdoors in a lot of ways. That
Yep.
it's sunrise is slow, but it's also going to save you on costs. There's no reason to pump 1,000 ppms or 1,200 ppms first thing in the morning. Um, it, they're not using it, and if
Yep.
anything, you're going to cause stress on the plant. So you have to monitor kind of everything. Airflow is another a big one, because airflow, microclimates is where you get the most inconsistency uh,
Hmm.
throughout a crop. If you've got microclimates, that means you have pockets of potentially high humidity and high temperature, which are then vectors for disease and pathogens and mold and all sorts of nasty things. So um, everything has to work together. But if I were to give one recommendation for anyone growing with LEDs and they're not happy with the results, is check the leaf surface temperature. And the way
Hmm.
you check it also matters. Don't just so one thing you can use is an IR gun. Um,
Actually, I went out and bought an IR gun after your post,
Great.
because I needed to try it. I needed to see for myself. Yeah, and it was eye opening. It was eye opening. I'm used to monitoring the temperature of my room, and I
Hmm.
go look at the temperature of my leaf surface, and yeah, it's about 5 or 6 degrees cooler. Fahrenheit.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
Yeah, it was eye opening, and figuring out, where can I move things so that I get a higher leaf temperature without having to drop the lights down right on top of them, because they don't like that. Also,
Mhm.
how are you getting the right leaf temperature? How are you maintaining this?
With room temperature. So
Yeah.
I'm just, because with LEDs, it's hard to get that radiant heat that I would with HPS bulbs.
Mm.
So
So
we're
you're
just
pumping heat into the room.
Yeah, so we're just in Thailand. I don't really need to pump the heat into the room,
Right.
but we just change the set point on our ACs, and
Yeah.
I'm measuring that leaf surface temperature, and I'm measuring it from multiple points on the plant. So I'm not just pointing it at the top leaf and then that's it. I'm pointing at the top leaf, the bottom leaf, and the middle, and I'm kind of taking an average, and I'm doing it in different points of the room, and that's a great way to also find potentially microclimates.
Mm.
Because one interesting thing that we found that really showed the effect of Rubisco was the first time I ever did a multi-tier grow, where we had a two-tier system. The top tier was always slightly warmer than the bottom,
Mm.
and we grew the same cultivar, and we were just seeing, you know, we we had to run the room cooler so that the top would would have the proper
Mm.
Rubisco range,
Yeah.
but then the bottom was a little bit cooler than what we wanted. But if we did it the other way around, the top would have got fried, and it
Mm.
was it was night and day difference in terms of yield. Um, the,
Huh.
the the plants up top that were in that optimal range were just they were huge, huge, huge,
Yeah.
huge buds.
Yeah. What I did is I did that. I brought a heater in to get my ambient heat in the room
Yeah.
up, um, and that worked quite well, actually. Plants loved it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. If this is something a lot of people just don't know, and in my career, I remember when I was starting out, I read this is what you should keep your room at. This is, but nobody really explained why. So the first time I heard of this, and it just like opened my eyes, and I'm like, of course, there's got to be a plant response that's actually happening. It's not just the air temperature. So if you can monitor that, you'll be a step ahead of a lot of growers, and it'll really be beneficial for your results.
Yeah, we were talking about this recently about putting yourself in the room and using yourself, your body, your face, your eyes, and your feelings for how the room feels. I mean, I when I walk into my room, and it's much degrees smaller than the rooms that you're used to walking into, but it's probably very similar to what you do. I walk in and I feel how the room feels to me. What does this feel like? What day of the year does this feel like in this room? Am I in summer? Am I in spring? Am I in fall right now? What period? What phase should I be in? Is this the beginning of flower? Is this the end of flower? Should it be hotter? So, I think we were talking about that, about how putting yourself, using yourself as a gauge, your own senses as a gauge, can be really important. Because walking into my room after that post about Rubisco, I was like sitting in there. I was like, this is a little cool. And come to think about it, if I were to walk outside in the middle of the summer where my plants are growing, it would be degrees way hotter than what I'm feeling right now. Way hotter, right? Leaf surface is going to be scorching, right, in the middle of the summer here. So it's nowhere close to that. So I could definitely have a little bit of have a little bit of room. Um, so it's really interesting stuff to me. But I wanted to get into a broader conversation about using environmental controls to grow healthier plants in general, and how prevention is always better than treatment. So being able to prevent the diseases and pests is always going to be a better option than having to get into the cycle of treating for diseases and pests, right? I was wondering if you could speak a bit about that.
Yeah, 100%. I'll just touch what you just said previously, though. If anyone takes anything from this conversation, it's please, get into the practice of being your own sensor.
Mm.
Um, Tools, sensors, all this fancy technology that's coming out or that's already out, they're great, but they should be more of a guide. Um, Ultimately, if you can get into the habit of feeling, if you're comfortable, the plants are comfortable. If it's a little bit cold, the plants are going to be a little bit cold. I like to, yeah, use all your senses, your
Or should you be
smell.
a little bit uncomfortable? Like in the middle of the
It's
summer, you should be sweating in there,
a
really. I
little bit,
mean,
yes, a little bit,
yeah,
yes. You don't want plants to be too comfortable because it's
yeah,
like if a human sits on a couch, they're feeling very comfortable, but then
Yeah.
they're not going to get good results. You want to push them a little bit, but
Yeah.
you are the best sensor, because your sense of nose. When I go into a room, does it smell funky in here? Is
Yeah.
there, is there propane leaking? Is there a smell of, if you ever had a room full of fusarium, you'll smell it.
You smell it. I smell it. I can smell that right off the bat, man. That's one
Exactly.
thing.
So your sense of smell, your eyes, is there any plants that are wilting, limping? Are the plants fluttering? Do you have good airflow, right? And in your face, do you feel, what's the humidity like? All of that. And then I just look at the equipment to see if it matches. But I've
Mm.
had countless times where the equipment was wrong. It wasn't calibrated correctly, or a sensor needed to be replaced. And if I just went off those numbers, um, you know, it would have been disastrous, right? But because I get so used to going in every day, and I'm like, no, there's no way that this is it, and then it makes me check the equipment. So they're there to guide, but you ultimately need to develop yourself, and this comes with years and years of practice of just feeling it. Then you can go to any facility, any grow room, and it doesn't really matter. You don't need the fancy equipment, because I've seen some growers that have just become so dependent on technology that if you take away their sensors and everything, they don't know what to do. They don't know what a plant should feel like, if it's been watered enough, not enough. They're just like, well, if I don't have the water content of the cube, like, I don't know what to do. Well, you can do things. There's a long time ago, people were growing without all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But to go back to the topic of prevention, I 100% agree. If you're a home grower, if you're a commercial grower, it doesn't matter. Prevention is the key, and prevention starts with two things, really. It starts with cleanliness and plant health. So if they're not the most attractive things to talk about, a lot of people kind of want to just get into the fun and growing and seeing nice flower come out. But really, it's the boring stuff that you do consistently that will determine your success in the long run. Many facilities, they build and they have a few good runs because they're clean at the very start, but then poor SOPs and poor sanitation practices, you end up getting dirtier and dirtier, and then that's when the problems start to compound. And then when you have those problems, whether it's mold, whether it's disease or pests or just anything, now you're not focusing on growing, you're just focusing on putting out fires. And as you put out one fire, another fire starts, and then it becomes, you don't enjoy going to the facility anymore. I've been
Yeah.
there where, you feel gross going into the room. You want to take a shower immediately after, and it's not fun. And when it's not fun, your energy goes down. And when your energy goes down, if you're doing it by yourself or with a team, the plants feel it. The plants are alive, and talking to the plants works. That's why there's always that old stereotype that gardeners always talk about, because they can hear.
Yeah.
They just hear in a different way. And if your energy is off, the room is going to be off. The plants are going to be off. So
Yep.
to prevent that, cleanliness, and that starts from clean water. I highly recommend, if you're growing at home, if you're not using an RO system, get your water checked. We had a farm out here, out in Chiang Mai. They were testing positive for E. coli, and it turned out it was in their water source, and they didn't have good filtration. So they fixed that. Um, Another big one for staying on top of water is water temperature. So, um, you know, the colder the water, the more oxygen it can hold, and oxygen is a huge part of, of, of plants. I mean, oxygen is important for everyone, every living thing.
Yep.
If you're feeding at too warm of a temperature, so I've seen people in Thailand here, they'll have their tanks outside with no chiller, and they're feeding
Wow.
30, like over 100 degrees Fahrenheit water, and they're just riddled with fusarium, pythium, and
Yeah.
all sorts of other waterborne diseases. And for some farms, they couldn't really afford money to buy fancy chillers, so we just got them to dig deep holes and bury their tanks underground, and that dropped the temperature significantly. So making sure the temperature is right, that's really important. And measure your temperature at delivery. That's another thing. People often just measure the temperature at their tank. um, I remember when I used to work at the ZAM in Canada, they had like a $45 million facility, giant facility with giant tanks, and they didn't know what's going on with the rooms, because they were like, our temperature is at like 16 degrees Celsius, and then it's coming up. Well, it had kilometers of piping that it had to go through before it reached the room. So that friction and uh, heat from the
The heat,
pump.
the heat
Yeah,
of the rooms themselves too.
and everything. It heated it up, and it was coming out like 5 or 6 degrees warmer
Mm.
than the source.
Yeah.
So the solution is to drop the source, but delivery is what really matters. That'll help keep the plants oxygenated, and it's all these little things that you do that help increase the defenses of the plant. Um, clean tools. That's another huge thing that it's easy to get lazy. You're just
Yeah.
going in there, especially if you're growing multiple cultivars. If you just go from one cultivar to another without properly sanitizing,
Mm.
um, you're just asking for disease to be transferred. An
Right.
example I like to use is if a surgeon did an operation on me, and Michelle, you were next, you would probably be a little bit concerned if he didn't change his PPE, he didn't change the utensils, he didn't
Right.
sanitize them, and just went straight to cutting. Right? We have to treat the plants the same way, almost like a medical environment,
Mm.
and that means full PPE, wear nitrile gloves that are powder free, and sanitize the gloves. Um,
Mm.
Big thing a lot of people don't do. They take the gloves out of the box, they put them on, and they think it's good to go.
Mm.
You can use 70% isopropyl, but sanitizing those gloves is important because they're not sterile coming out of the box. When sanitizing utensils or scissors, we like to use 10% food grade bleach. Um,
Ten
it's been
percent
shown.
solution of bleach.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. But food grade, not the laundry bleach or anything
Right.
scented.
Yep.
Um, you know, Ideally you want to soak the blades for up to about a minute, and then rinse them off with water to get the residue out. It's been shown to be more effective than H2O2 in terms
Mm.
of getting rid of all sorts of diseases. So
Yep.
some people use 3% food grade H2O2. That's fine too,
Yep.
but bleach seems to be the most effective, and do that can save you from, let's say you got someone just gave you some new clones of a new genetic that you were very excited to try out, and you put it into your mother room, you didn't quarantine, you didn't get it tested, um, and then it turns out as you're growing it that actually it has something, it has tobacco mosaic, or maybe it has fusarium, or maybe it has pythium. If you don't have your SOPs in place and you're just kind of going from plant to plant, you've just now infected your entire genetic library, and it is
Yep.
very expensive to clean that up. But if you have those SOPs, and this has happened from experience where we were very strict on SOPs, we brought outside genetics into a commercial setting, and it had tobacco mosaic. But because our staff was trained to, properly sanitize, change PPE in between cultivars, it was isolated to that one genetic,
Yep.
and it cost us a lot of money in testing because we had to test everything. But
Mm.
ultimately, it saved our company. So really, really important that you sanitize, and and also keep logs of everything. Right,
Mm.
like it's very important to keep data, because if you're if you have an IPM regimen, right, you don't want to be inconsistent with it. Where
Mm.
I'll spray today, and when's the last time I sprayed? And you're just kind of going off the top of your head. It's going to be inconsistent. Plants like
Mm.
consistency. They like being watered,
Mm.
same time of day. They if having an IPM regimen is important. And I don't mean that using harsh chemicals. We don't use any harsh chemicals, but
Yep.
we like to use biologicals, keeping the root zone healthy. So it's better to be proactive than reactive. Building
Yep.
up the plant's defenses is crucial. Building up that root zone. If you build up a strong enough plant, PM, the mold spores won't even be able to penetrate the hyphae,
Mm.
if you have the cell walls thick enough and strong enough. Uh,
Yep.
Mold and pathogens and pests, they go after the weakest plants. So if you've got
Yep.
weak spindly plants, and you're not doing proper IPM, and you got a weak root zone with lacking oxygen, it's just asking to get sick. So you want to keep those plants healthy, and the root zone healthy, and clean up, like, save whatever your schedule is. Save the last 15 to 20 minutes of the day for
Mm.
sweeping up, cleaning up. No
Yep.
leaves on the table. Too many times I go through and I just see, they were defoliating and they just leave these leaves on the table. Or
Yep.
if I see algae on the table, like, that's a huge no-no. Like, you need to just give that extra little bit, and it's not a lot. It's a lot when you've let it go for a long
Yep.
time without doing it.
Yep.
And then you got to do like an hour, 2 hour massive cleanup. But if you do a little bit every day, it just becomes a habit. And the cleanest facilities are the best facilities. You know,
Yep.
change of clothes. So I'm just all these things that are coming to my head, but
Yeah.
don't go from the outside right into your facility. Or if you're going into the facility, have a designated changing area where you can put on a uniform.
Yep.
You can put on
Clean
your
room.
hairnet, clean room. You can put on
Yep.
shoes that are dedicated to, ideally, shoes that are cleanable, so that
Yep.
you can sanitize those as well. That's huge. Too many times people come from the
Yep.
outside, and if you got pets or dogs or cats,
Yep.
they carry lots of little bugs, and you go outside, you pet them, you come into your facility. Now all of a sudden you've brought it into your facility. So
Yeah.
these little points, they may seem kind of common sense and minor, but they're just as applicable in the commercial setting, and definitely just as applicable in the home
For
grower
home
setting.
growers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's when we moved into this new place that I'm in a few years ago, I had a chance to do just a complete clean slate, brand new room, brand new everything, clean everything. But we have rabbits in our house. And I don't know if nobody raises rabbits in their facility for a reason because their hair floats through the air,
Yes.
right? Like feathers, it just flies. And the first crop was just full of rabbit hairs, right? Not a good situation, definitely not preferable. So I went through a process of locking down my grow room, built a clean room. So I take off my shoes, I change clothes before I go into my flower room. I have multiple levels of filtration on my lung room to get those hairs out of the system. And yeah, I'm using so I use hypochlorous acid and rubbing alcohol to get resin off of things, and hypochlorous for the sanitizing. Um, and I was a medical grower for many years, and I still am. And growing clean cannabis was always very important to me for that reason, because I grew for people with compromised immune systems, et cetera. And for me personally, I feel like cannabis should be grown to medical standards. I mean, if you're going for yourself, that's one thing. Nobody else is smoking it. Do whatever you want to do with it, really. But if you're going for other people, medical standards should be the standard for what you're shooting for. I mean, there's like a responsibility to the other person to not give them bunny hairs, to not give them weed that has fusarium mold on it. There's a responsibility, and so I feel like I've been learning from directors of cultivation and like you, and learning how to these methods for GACP and for maintaining these medical standards in growing. I've been taking those lessons home, and trying to implement them in my little grow space, and it's really paid off, man. I have to say, like, I had about a fusarium a couple of times in the last few years, but that was from overwatering. No pests, no other diseases. And it's
Uh,
been incredible, dude. Because usually I'm battling one disease or I'm fighting one pest or one thing or the other. It's been heaven. It's been incredible.
that's beautiful to hear. I completely agree. I remember when I first started growing. Um, Prior to that, I wasn't like a huge cannabis smoker. I was more of like the occasional. If someone brought something out at a party or something, I would try it. But I never gave it a second thought where it's coming from, who grew it.
Hmm.
And then when I got into the industry and I started growing for myself, and I got a chance to visit other facilities, that was the moment I stopped smoking other people's weed. I literally
Yeah.
stopped. Unless I knew the grower personally, and I knew their standards.
You know what
I
his
just
protocols are. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew the protocols. I
Yeah.
saw some of the, like, just to give you an example, this is not that bad of an example, but it is bad. Like, in commercial settings would never fly, and Health Canada would never approve this. But you're trimming, someone drops a bud, they just pick it up, they continue trimming, and they throw it in the bag.
Right.
In the commercial setting, that is now garbage. Anything that
Yep.
falls on the floor, that is for destruction. But in the legacy market, nobody cared. That's weight, that was money, and people were more
Yeah.
aligned to making money. Worse than that, I've seen people spraying heavy pesticides, day before harvest because they got PM, so they're trying to mask it and hide it. And that's the thing with legalization, is it brings some sort of regulation because it is something that you're consuming, right?
Yep.
It's really important, and if you're growing for yourself, uh, you're only doing yourself harm if you're not following the right steps.
Hmm.
My smoke test has always been how I feel the day after,
Hmm.
because I've smoked cannabis that was, felt fine when I smoked it. I'm like, yeah, it's good. Everything is fine. But the next day, if I'm getting that groggy feeling, or I got some sort of
Hmm.
headache, or, I'm feeling a little bit hungover, let's say, that shouldn't
Yep.
be happening. Good, clean, medical grade flower does not do that to you. You're
Right.
that's usually residue from pesticides or from mold or you know poor quality flour. So 100%. I'm glad it's working for you. I've seen in facilities across the world, the more strict you are. So we have a rule actually. Whenever I go teaching any team and my team, even if it's the first day we just built the facility, the rule is treat the facility as if it's infected.
Hmm.
If you have that in
Yeah.
your head, you're going to stay disciplined. The
Hmm.
moment you start getting relaxed and complacent, that's when the problems start. You're supposed to change uniforms in between rooms. It's just for a quick second. I'm just going to go in there, and
Yeah.
then that starts to become a habit. If you treat every room and plant like it's potentially infected, you're going to be on
Yeah.
top of your game, and that's kind of the best suggestion I can give on that.
That's a great one. That's a really great one. And I feel the same way when I probably take it over the top. I mean, it's just me and I'm growing for my family and nobody's looking and like there's no GACP, inspectors coming over and stuff. So maybe I take it a little bit too far, but I'm like every surface I treat as like, okay, unless I just sanitized it, that's dirty.
Yes,
So,
that's the
uh,
right approach. You can never
yeah.
really overdo it with sanitation, right? Because you're keeping things clean, and you're even if you get pests or mold spores or whatever, the pressure is going to be a lot less. You'll be able to handle it more because it's not compounding, right? Because
Yeah.
it's you don't see the reaction right away. It's just it builds over time, and you haven't sanitized in a long time, and then when you finally do see it, it's a little bit too late. Now you're reacting, and now, like I said before, you're not growing. You're putting out fires, and we don't want to do that, right? So, it's it's not the funnest thing. And for
Yeah.
facility growers, um, people that are tasked with that job, they don't love that job. It's the hardest part
You
of
know
the
what's
job.
less fun? Getting rid of spider mites.
100%, hundred
That's
percent.
much less fun. I'd
It's
much
it's
rather clean stuff.
I'd rather clean. And even when I started working in the legal market, I started from entry level despite having I had over 10 years of experience at that point.
Yeah.
But I applied for an entry level job just to get my foot in the door and show what I had. And, they put me into scrubbing toilets, cleaning bathrooms, cleaning the floor, sanitizing the flower rooms, sanitizing dry rooms. I I did it with a smile on my face because
Yeah.
you need to do that. If you ever have ambitions of being a head grower or a director of cultivation or anything in this space, you need to do those things.
Mm.
They're not fun, but you need to know how to do them so that once you get to that managerial position, how it's supposed to be done. If someone's taking too long to do it, or if they're not doing it in an optimal way, how are you supposed to do that if you've never done it, right? So
Yeah.
these things really matter, and for people that are managing a team, I would say um, make the people that are doing those jobs feel special because they are special. Oftentimes they get overlooked, and everyone's just focusing on the guys that are doing the flower rooms and the results. But really, if the rooms aren't sanitized correctly, we're not going to pass our COA. We're not going to pass microbials.
Mm.
We're not going to pass a lot of things, and it starts with sanitation. So the people that are tasked with that job, they're just as important. Your system, your machine is only as strong as your weakest link. So if you're thinking that this is like, I can, it's just a minimum wage job, anyone can do cleaning. Not really. Like it is paid usually on the lower end of things, but in terms of its importance, I'd rank it probably as top three most important
Yeah.
out of everything. So you can have the best genetics in the world, you can have the best environment in the world, you can have the best grower in the world, but if you're starting off in a dirty place that's not doesn't have the proper SOPs, it's going to
Mm.
fail regardless.
Mm. Yeah. I say I spend probably twice as much time cleaning as I do actually taking care of plants.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
that's true. That's true. That's a sign of a good clean grow.
For sure. Damien, we're going to move into kind of the last few minutes here, but I wanted to ask you words of advice. So, do you have any words of advice for home growers? If it were you, however many years ago, starting all the way over again, what would you tell yourself? What words of advice would you give?
Well, that's a good question. I would definitely say learn to read the plants. I may have mentioned that at the beginning, but that I learned very early on from my first mentor, because I was I was asking him like what should be the feeding schedule and how much this and that. And I was very I'm generally a numbers driven guy. I'm very analytical,
Yeah.
but I've learned early on that growing plants and cannabis is not just a math equation that you just put together and everything will be successful. There is a touch of love and feeling and energy that goes with it, and if you can blend that with analytical, you'll be a really good grower.
Mm.
So if you can learn to read the plants and not focus so much on feeding schedules, of course you want to stay within EC and pH ranges, I just quickly, this is a piece of advice. Most issues I found 90% of issues with plants tend to be pH issues. So,
Mm.
when you see symptoms, people think, oh, it
Yeah.
needs this nutrient, it needs that. No, it's unlikely that you're missing nutrients. It's the pH is not in range and the plants aren't able to absorb it.
Brother,
Um,
I've been growing for 24 years and I still mess up pH, man.
it's
It
very
still
easy.
gets me. It
Yeah,
still
it's
gets
very
me.
easy to mess that up. So that's a little piece of advice. I wish I
Yeah.
knew that a little bit earlier because I was always like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And it was
Right.
always pH.
Yep.
That's a huge one. Uh, Kind of going back to sensors with pH. If you are using whatever sensor, a meter, I highly recommend um, having a second test, even something like a color test,
Mm.
because I've been burned multiple times where I was depending on the sensor. It showed me
Yeah.
one pH. I thought I was feeding a 6.0 or a 5.9. I was actually feeding a 5.0 because the
Yep.
sensor was broken or decalibrated.
Yeah.
Don't trust those
That
things.
exact thing happened to me. I decalibrated my sensor, and for like several rounds of fertigation, my pH was way off, man. Oh,
Yeah.
it was a
So
mess.
something simple like, I'm checking the pH with the meter. It tells me 5.8 to 6.0. I have a little water color test because that can't get decalibrated. I put it in
Yep.
there. It should be, slight orangish to yellow in color. I know I'm within
Right.
that range. Everything is fine. Takes a
Yep.
couple extra seconds. It'll save you a crop. It happened to me. It happened to you.
Yep.
But to go back to advice, read the plants, learn to be your own sensor, and don't be afraid to ask ask growers. There's a lot of information out there,
Yep.
and you know it it's hard to know what to put together because sometimes what works for one grower won't work for another grower
Mm.
if that entire system's not in place. But the more information you can gather and see how it'll apply to your system,
Mm.
um, the more knowledge it will be. Don't get complacent if you have one good result. Like try to master that way of doing it. But growing is evolving all the time. Um, I'm evolving all the time. My team's evolving all the time, and it's going to continue. There's going to be new research that comes out and things that we thought in the legacy times that were, kind of urban legends and turn out not to be true and so forth. So if you have a passion, keep going and don't let the best way is to get ahead in this industry is through experience.
Mm.
I don't know what the future holds. I've been kind of grandfathered in. I don't have a degree in horticulture or plant biology or any of that. I just learned through trial and error and many years of experience. I
Yep.
don't know if that will be the case, but I am seeing a lot of people come out of school that have a lot of theoretical knowledge, but frankly, I rather have somebody that has no knowledge. I rather have somebody that just has passion. And if you have passion, that will and determination and work ethic, that will trump any kind of schooling, any kind of theoretical stuff, because it shines through, and you don't have that ego. Too many people
Mm.
I find like they finish the school, and that's not it's not to say about everyone. There are some amazing PhDs that I've met and worked with,
Yep.
and people with degrees that are just phenomenal people. But I've seen a lot of people that get into it. They just finished school. They'll argue with like, well, actually, this isn't the right thing, but experience trumps all. I'm sure you can
It
relate
takes
to this.
season. Yeah.
It takes seasoning. So just if I were starting, I'm actually happy with the path I went because I did have passion. Ask questions, reach out. It's easier now more than ever. There's communities, there's YouTube, there's AI,
Yeah.
there's so many things that you can do and
There's
just
almost
keep
too much information out there. It's hard. It's kind of
in a way there is, and that's
yeah.
that's the difficulty. I'm looking it's been bothering me for a while. I always thinking of starting a school back when I was in Canada or something, because I was just like, man, so many people were coming from the industry and worked in other cannabis companies, and I thought, oh, okay, they have experience, and then they were just doing things completely wrong, and I'm like, there should be kind of like a school that kind of teaches the basics, and especially if you're interested in the legal market, because in the home grow kind of thing, things aren't strict. No one's checking you, no one's testing you, no one's
Right.
doing any of these things. But in the commercial setting, it's a totally different ballgame. You really have to learn how to operate in that field, because you'll get burned if you're just coming from legacy into commercial and you don't have the proper SOPs in place. So tracking is a huge thing. Just like any product, you're gonna have to have a recall SOP. So if something happens, you have to be able to trace back exactly all the nutrients that were used, all the media that was used, because
Mm,
something happened with that batch. You need to be able to trace it back. That can still be applied to the home grow.
mm,
I find if you log things consistently, you'll find trends. So with pH and EC, if you're catching runoff daily and you're growing a cultivar, you'll actually see the trend of when the plant starts to pick up in terms of its consumption, and when it starts to taper down. So then you can be proactive and start tapering down the feed before it happens, because now you know this cultivar. You don't need to feed it, max
mm.
EC and overfeed it. So you can't do that if you're just kind of every now and then checking runoff and whatever. If you are serious about it and you're tracking this, you'll create a nice data set for every cultivar, and then you'll know it like the back of your hand. You'll know what it's going to do before it happens, and that's
Yep.
beautiful. That's you really feel special, and if you give that cultivar to someone else to grow, you have a whole set of notes that's just going to make their life easier. I
Mm,
don't believe in secrets. I'm always an open book. I love talking about cannabis. Um,
yeah.
I
Same.
think if you're one to say I have a secret sauce, I don't want to say this. To me, it's always been a sign of insecurity. I've always found
Mm,
that the individuals that are very secretive, it always turned out in the end they didn't really know as much as they put on that they know.
yeah.
If you're confident, you have nothing to hide, and if you're confident and have a passion, you want to. I treat even the beginner when I'm talking about cannabis, just like I would an expert, in that they may have heard something or read something about the topic that I haven't, and I've been
Mm.
doing it much longer. So I don't go in with it like with a, you know, big ego that like, oh, you're just a beginner. I'm the master grower and I know it. No, there is no master
There's
grower.
so much to learn about this plant.
No,
So
it's
much,
it's never ending, and that's what makes it so exciting. That's
right?
what drives me every day, because it's not. I'm not making a bottle of vodka that's the same bottle of vodka every single day.
Right.
I'm growing living things, living plants that are constantly changing, and new
So
cultivars.
dynamic. Yeah.
So dynamic. It's really beautiful. It's not easy.
Yeah.
You have to have a passion, or you're going to burn out. It's not for everyone, for sure.
Mm,
But if you do love it, it's probably, for me, it's the most beautiful, thing I've ever done. It gives me the reason to get up and not feel like I'm going to work. I feel great every single day, and I go. Not only am I growing, and I think there is sort of almost a kind of ancestral feel to it, where you're the gardener, you're growing, you're giving something life, you're nurturing it to the end, but you're producing something that's beneficial to so many people,
yeah.
and you're helping build an industry that has gotten such a bad stigma due to so much propaganda and BS. And when you actually look at the history, like I'm in Thailand right now, and I had no idea coming here that they had such a rich history with cannabis spanning like so many years. The word bong is actually comes from Thai.
Yeah.
Bong means bamboo, because they would make
Hmm.
bongs out of bamboo. And I didn't know that it was so rich. China, Japan, they all
Well, we
have.
know that it originated in Asia.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this,
It's just I didn't know that it was that long, like that it's really a short period of time
yeah,
where it's gotten such a bad reputation and stigma. And
yeah,
I mentioned in previous talks with you, like I had that wrong sense of thinking coming out of school, is I really believed that cannabis was, I believed all the propaganda. And when you
yeah,
finally realize it's not true, and if you have somebody that it does help. I lost my uncle, my mom's brother, to cancer about probably almost 10 years now, 10 years ago, and he went through chemotherapy and everything. Never touched cannabis in his life. Um, Never even thought about it. But the chemo and the treatment was so difficult with his sleep and nausea and eating that I got him some Phoenix Tears oil, and he tried that, and for the last bit of his life, he said it's the only thing that gave him, um, a functional kind of like he could go on through the days.
Yeah.
It gave him a sense of life back. He could sleep, he could eat, he could enjoy himself, and
Yeah.
seeing that, really,
Once you see something like that, once you see it in real life,
you
you
never go
really,
back. You'll never go back.
you
It,
understand it's sacred medicine, and this is sacred knowledge kind of that we're passing on,
100%.
as growers. So
So it's a beautiful plant. We're still learning it. I think we're just scraping the surface of what it really can do. I think I'm glad to see a big step in the U.S. just recently with the reclassification. I think it was a long time coming. There's still work to be done, but I'm hoping kind of just the way when the U.S. made it illegal, that kind of kiboshed everything across the globe. I'm glad to see that we're going in the right direction, and the world's your oyster. If someone told me I'm going to be growing in Thailand years back, there's no way, right? And now I'm here, so I have no idea where it's going to take me, but it's been a beautiful experience, and I'm just happy to share knowledge and everything I've learned up to this point.
excellent. Well, Damien, that's all the time that we have today. Damien Michalski, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Michelle Nevedo. This is the Friday 420. Until next time, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.